Right, let's dive straight in. Welcome to this explainer on Chapter 10 of the Constitution of the Republic of Tajikistan. Today, we're going to explore exactly how the supreme law of the land can and, crucially, cannot be changed. Since the Constitution is literally the ultimate foundation of the state, understanding the mechanics of how it gets updated gives us an incredible look into the legal architecture of the Republic. We're going to go through this chapter article by article to see how the system operates in practice and what it really takes to rewrite the rules of a nation. Here is our roadmap for today. First, proposing amendments. Second, approval via referendum. Third, the unchangeable provisions. Fourth, transitional provisions. And finally, why all these rules actually matter. Part 1. Proposing amendments. We're looking right at Article 9 here to see who gets to actually kick off a constitutional change. So there's a really fascinating contrast here between simply suggesting an amendment and actually putting it to a vote. Article 99 tells us that proposing an amendment requires either the president or at least 1/3 of the members of both houses of parliament. However, if you want to actually call a nationwide referendum under Article 98, that requires a much higher threshold, either the president or at least 2/3 of the lower house deputies. It's this brilliant structural filter. It makes it easier to start a conversation than to force the entire country to the ballot box. It ensures that only proposals with serious institutional backing make it all the way through. Which brings us to Part 2, approval via referendum. Because once a referendum is successfully called, the process has to be managed incredibly carefully to ensure legitimacy. Changing the Constitution is far from an overnight event. It mandates a very strict process. It flows logically, right? It starts with that authorized proposal we just discussed, moves to a mandatory publication in the press, and culminates in the ultimate decider, the nationwide referendum dictated by Article 98. This progression ensures that any shift in the supreme law is highly deliberate and, frankly, impossible to hide from the public eye. I really want to zero in on that middle step, which hinges on a massive number in constitutional terms. 3. Under Article 99, any proposed amendments must be published exactly 3 months prior to the referendum. That mandatory waiting period guarantees citizens have ample time to read, debate, and truly understand the changes before they vote. It completely prevents rushed, last-minute alterations to the supreme law. When you're dealing with a document this powerful, time is arguably your absolute greatest safeguard against instability. Moving to Part 3, unchangeable provisions. Let's see what happens when we hit the absolute boundaries of constitutional law. This is probably the most fascinating part of Chapter 10. Article 100 explicitly lists 6 foundational pillars that are permanently protected from any amendment. Honestly, it doesn't matter how many people vote in a referendum, these cannot be touched. They include the Republican form of government, territorial integrity, its democratic and law-based nature, and its status as a secular and social state. These elements are hardwired into the Republic's DNA. They are simply not up for debate, ensuring the country remains firmly anchored to its core founding principles. The text here is incredibly direct. It literally says these elements are unchangeable. This creates an ultimate safeguard, ensuring that no temporary political movement can ever alter the very definition of what the Republic is. It essentially draws a permanent line in the sand that says, you can change the rules, but you absolutely cannot change the game itself. Let's look at Part 4, transitional provisions. How do these theoretical rules transition into practical reality? To understand this, let's look at the transition rules from the May 2016 referendum. We can map out exactly how constitutional updates take effect without causing total legal chaos. The amendments activate immediately upon the official publication of the results. But to prevent a legal vacuum, prior laws remain fully active as long as they don't contradict the new rules. Government officials then take their required oaths under the updated framework. It's a meticulously designed bridge connecting the old rules to the new ones, ensuring the everyday functioning of the state doesn't miss a beat. A perfect example of this in action is Clause 3 of those transitional provisions, which specifically addresses executive term limits. Legally speaking, it dictates that the 2-term limit outlined in Article 65 resets and begins only after the incumbent's current term ends. This shows exactly how a transitional provision functions. It doesn't just state a new rule, it defines the precise timeline for when that rule actually activates within the existing political continuity. It's all about the seamless application of the law. Finally, Part 5, why these rules matter. Let's step back and look at the big picture. It's easy to look at this as just dry legal procedure, but Chapter 10 is so much more than that. These are the supreme mechanisms that safeguard the nation's identity.
By setting strict requirements for proposing changes, mandating that 3-month public review period, requiring a nationwide referendum, and entirely locking down the core secular and democratic pillars of the state, this framework ensures that the supreme blueprint of the republic remains stable, deliberate, and fiercely protected. It shows a profound respect for the permanence of the state itself.
I'll leave you with this final thought as we wrap up this explainer. How do these unchangeable provisions define the future of the state? Because when the very nature of a state is made legally untouchable, it sets a permanent trajectory for its people and its institutions for generations to come. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into Chapter 10.